Oh, everybody. So you decided to come back. Okay. So where did we go? Where did we leave off from? Well, so I was talking about my previous workplace and kind of the interesting things that happened there. But yeah, so let's actually go right into, well, kind of continue on kind of how it all unfolded. So yeah, the supervisor that I was talking about, the one that was currently transitioning into a female. Um, we started like I started noticing, and especially a group of guys that I was working with over the coming weeks, and just seeing the changes that she was making, or he soon to be she. Again, nothing against those people and what they're doing. Um, you know, this is not an attack towards anybody. This is just things that um, we just noticed, and that really kind of um, made things a bit toxic, made for a real toxic work environment, which I cannot believe I stuck out. Like it was that bad. Um, so with with the changes that she was doing, like every day, when we come into to work, you know, there'd be something new, something different. Different, obviously painted fingernails, changes in her, body, and it started to unfold very slowly, but like the changes were obviously pretty noticeable. And really, where it kind of went downhill for my entire contract when I was working there and the year after, because I did end up returning to do another contract, knowing that this supervisor, well, actually, there was another one. We'll have to talk about him later, knowing that they were going to be back. And I decided to go back up there. So, again, I'm going to be talking about that in a little bit. But, and it really built up my resilience, man, and my stress tolerance to a point where nothing, and again, I'm only 26, so obviously I got a lot more experiences and a lot of life ahead of me. But I learned a lot in those 2 years about what I could handle mentally, psychologically, physically. Um, and especially living with somebody that's toxic. I mean, it's one thing to work with somebody that's like a toxic coworker, but it's another thing to live with them. That's a completely different level, which I wasn't even prepared to deal with. But I endured it for quite some time. And, again, you know, looking back, that's really built a lot of resilience and character in me that, being around somebody like that, to handle somebody like that, with intelligence and understanding and kind of just, you know, not adding fuel to the fire, really, you know, it really sort of um, it just taught me a lot. So um, she ended up, well, he ended up, you know, I don't know what to say, but he ended up taking, and she would be vocal about this, hormone changing medication. Now, when that started to happen, every single morning when we come in, and we had, this was going to be the busiest time of the year. So a lot of people were going to be, passing through here. It was a very busy time, so we had to hire on students, and students, high school students, people out of college, they got hired on to help us out. So every morning we'd have like a group meeting, and every time she would be involved in the meeting, she would just, and this is how toxic it became. She just blasted all her negativity, and she was so angry, and just it was just like this person was so mentally unstable and mentally unfit to be a supervisor and to be in any type of leadership or management position, mind you. that was trying to run the show, that was trying to lead everybody. And every day it just got worse. She would, in the morning, she would, always attack people, always be in a really, really nasty mood. And she would, spout all this negativity about how she hated her position, she hated her job, she didn't want to be here, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, well, then why are you here? Like, why are you? I mean, I guess it's for the money. I guess you need it. I guess you maybe have like a mortgage to pay and stuff. Yeah, because she did live like within the within one of the smaller towns, so she would commute, which would be crazy in itself because again, the place where I was working at was remote. So the nearest town was there were two towns. There was one that was an hour away and there was one that was an hour and a half away. And she lived in the town that was an hour and a half away. So every single day she wouldn't even like she had the our supervisor even had the option to live free, you know, at at her housing unit, and she barely did that. I'm just gonna say she from now on, okay? So that's what ended up happening. She just can't. She kept commuting back and forth you know, from the workplace, and it was just insane the amount of gas she would spend. I would be thinking about it. I'm like, that's insane. So yeah, throughout this entire season, she would, every day would be worse, and it's because she was taking this hormone kind of changing medication. So her mental capacity or her uh, just her emotions would be all over the place every single day. She would piss a lot of people off. I remember, there would be times where, I'd be doing a task and she would like sabotage me. Like those people, like people like that just try and sabotage you like that. I just, there's one thing to be competitive and there's another thing to try and like throw somebody out or make it look like this somebody's, you know, that I'm not doing a good job. Like, I don't know if this video is coming out the way I want it to be. Like, this is kind of just me kind of ranting about my previous experience with this person. But, you know, it was funny because, you know, I ended up coming back the next year after witnessing all of that, all of that drama and all those toxic experiences that she would bring about. And after my contract is over, I'm like, well, I don't really think I want to go back. I mean, it was like one of the most beautiful places to work in, and she kind of just ruined it. And I just said to myself, I feel like I want to go back next year. Like, I don't know if it was me trying to just challenge myself, but I said to myself, I'm not going to let this person, stop me from trying to pursue a career. And sorry, guys, I had to like the mic, the mic battery cut off. So just kind of, yeah, finishing up on the topic, if you ever have like a toxic supervisor or somebody at work, um, obviously if, you know, for me anyway, it was a rough experience, but I learned a lot about myself, especially before coming into it, before, meeting this person and interacting with them. I was pretty sensitive to a lot of things. I didn't really have much resilience that was built up. I didn't really know about my stress tolerance, but after 2 seasons with the supervisor, like after that, I'm like, I don't know, I think I can handle, pretty much the worst of somebody. Um, I'm sure there's worse people out there, but this one was definitely going to be in my mind, and for future stories to tell people later on. About how I built up my character and stuff. But yeah, just one of the lessons was if if you're being challenged like that, just to never give up, always aim for your goals. For me, it ended up didn't work. It didn't really work out well because I didn't end up pursuing the career. But you know what? I look at that as a, the universe telling me, hey, you know what? You did what you did here. You won your battle. You managed to work with somebody like that, in somebody that toxic, and that was for a reason. That was to build up your character, build up your resilience, build up your stress tolerance. And from that moment, I mean, I even got compliments like, I don't know how you manage to handle somebody like that every day, and deal with the stress that comes with working under somebody like that that's mentally unstable and not well. And it took a lot from me. And there were days where I would be like, just like, should I quit? But I said to myself, no, I gotta go through this for a reason. Like, and I think it was pretty obvious. It was to just see how much I can take mentally and psychologically. And that really, from that moment onward, that really built up my resilience when it comes to handling that, handling toxic people like that. And yeah, just, there was another supervisor. So this supervisor, like, there was a supervisor, and then there was her supervisor that was above her. And man, this guy was even worse. he was even worse. This guy pretty much just sit on his ass all day, just older guy, about to retire and doesn't really care about the job anymore, just kind of in it to collect his pension. But this guy would try and sabotage everybody. I mean, when it came to work and stuff, he would treat it like his little fun house. He would, lie to people, tell them, things that weren't true about other people. He gossiped a lot about different departments. If anybody's worked with somebody like that, like, that they're like, like why are these people still here? And the answer is they don't really care, and they just find it fun to try and torment people and stuff. So a takeaway from this video would be, if you're in a toxic environment, obviously for your own mental health and well-being, like, you should look out for yourself for sure. But maybe there's a lesson that you need to go through. Maybe this person, as toxic as it may seem, is trying to test you, is trying to, and again, the job that I was doing wasn't a bad job. I loved doing the job. I loved the environment. Again, one of the most beautiful places to work in. But you just can't let people ruin that experience for you. You have to, you have to push through it, and that's what I did. And it took a lot out of me, but I built up a ton of mental strength from that. It wore me out at the end, but man, like, after that experience, I don't know if I'll be meeting somebody as extreme as this individual. So hope you guys learned something, and many stories and experiences to come. I've been through a lot, so if any of you guys want to ask anything in the comments, let me know, and I'll respond to them. But still got a long life ahead of me. I know I got a lot of things that are gonna happen, and yeah, so I want to make this. I'm pretty tired, so see you guys in the next video.